Hello, welcome back to my channel. Today's going to be a little fall wrap up because it's been a long time since I did a wrap up on my channel. I think the last time I wrapped up anything was in February, and I've read a lot since then. I'm not going to talk about every book that I read this year since my last wrap up because that video would be one, too long, two, very boring. Because I didn't really read a lot of things that just absolutely stood out to me. Anything that did stand out to me, either in a positive or negative way, I will likely be talking about in my end of year, like best and worst books videos. So I'm just going to talk about the books that I read in September, October, and November. I'm not really going to do this in any particular order other than I'm going to talk about them in the months that I read them. So we're going to start with September and work our way up to November, obviously. You get it. The first book I'm going to talk about is Migrations by Charlotte McConaughey. This is about a woman who is studying birds. She's a biologist and she studies birds, and she is following the last flock of Arctic terns as they make basically their final migration. It's set in this post-apocalyptic-ish world, like it's post-apocalyptic adjacent, and basically the climate has failed and the planet is dying, and our main character is trying to see if these Arctic terns will manage to survive. She convinces a ship captain and his crew to make the travel down to Antarctica with the promise that she will be able to find them fish that they can then gather and sell, because that is their trade. They are fishermen. I read this because I previously read Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey, and it is one of my favorite books of the year. This was really good. I didn't like it as much as Once There Were Wolves, but I did really enjoy it. I really liked our main character. She has some secrets that she is keeping from the rest of the crew and the captain of the ship. And so as the story sort of unfolds, you get to learn more about our main character, what has led her to this mission, and kind of what she's got haunting her in her past. I would say that Charlotte McConaughey is writing books for like the human experience right now. It is a really interesting examination of not only how humans affect the planet and how we are so detrimental to the succession and survival of the earth, but also how we survive each other and what makes a person a person. I would absolutely recommend Charlotte McConaughey. She is by far one of my new favorite authors that I discovered this year, and I would 100% recommend this to any and everyone. I'm going to talk about a nonfiction book that has been everywhere this year, so I'm probably not going to talk about it for too long because what's been said about it is far better than what I could ever say about it. But I did read One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This by Omar El-Akkad. This is part memoir, part journalistic take on what is happening in Palestine, and it is so incredibly important. It is one of the most important pieces of nonfiction I think that could be read at the moment. Omar El-Akkad is a journalist, and so his voice is so strong in this book. I read or listened to the audiobook, which Omar El-Akkad narrates himself, which I would highly recommend. Essentially, this is just a look at the war in Gaza and how when everything is settled, when the dust is settled and there's no more war, then everyone will come out and say, well, I was against that, instead of speaking up in the moment and actually advocating for the people of Palestine. It is as important as everyone has said it is. So you should do yourself a favor and read it. It's also not very long, so you could probably read it in an afternoon. I'll just talk about the other book that I don't physically have that I read in September, and that was The Husbands by Holly Gramazio. This is about a woman who comes home from a bachelorette party one night to find a man in her house who says that he is her husband. And she's not married, she doesn't know who this man is, but she soon discovers that anytime she sends someone up into the attic, sends a man up into the attic, a new husband will come down. She is just kind of dating all these people and looking for the right fit, and it's a really fun story. I really liked seeing all of the different scenarios that our main character got herself in. It is definitely full of some shenanigans and hijinks. It's not all, just romance and happiness. She dates some absolute duds throughout the story, and then also just some very interesting characters. I will say that the book did feel a little bit repetitive. Somewhere around the middle, I started to feel like I was over the whole thing. It felt like it was dragging on far too long, and I was a bit dissatisfied with the ending. I felt like the book was building up to something much bigger than what ended up happening. So yeah, it wasn't like a perfect new 5-star amazing book to me, but it was really fun. I would definitely recommend it if you're looking for a book that is definitely entertaining, will keep you sort of engaged the whole time, and just have a good time while you're going through it. Next up, I'm going to talk about Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. This is a historical fiction novel that spans many generations of this one Korean family who are living in Japan. We're mainly following Sunja, who, when she is a teenager, gets pregnant by a man who is unwilling to marry her. And so instead she accepts an offer of marriage from a minister who then moves her to Japan and offers to raise her child as his own. Then we just follow Sanja and her children as they live their lives in Japan, but are definitely looked down upon and on the outskirts of society as Koreans. It spans many years, including the Japanese occupation of Korea, World War II, and then eventually into the 80s. And it is a really interesting examination of family, history, and also identity. I really liked that I learned about some things that I didn't know about. I wasn't as aware of the Japanese occupation of Korea. I didn't really know very much of the Japanese and Korean viewpoint as far as World War II is concerned, but I did feel like this book definitely held the reader at arm's length for the entirety of the story. I never really felt connected to any of the characters. I liked that we got to follow many different generations. I really love multi-generational stories, but I felt because of the way that the characters were written, I was never rooting for any one character. We're in many different perspectives as the book goes on, and I never felt excited to get back to anyone's POV, which was kind of disappointing for me, especially for such a long book. I felt like the book had a lot to offer and a lot to say, and I really enjoyed my time reading it, but I wouldn't say that the book was this absolute 5-star read that I was predicting it would be. I had seen many people say that it was an emotional, devastating story, that I would probably cry. I didn't cry. I felt fairly apathetic towards the end, and overall, it just wasn't like the absolute win that I was hoping it would be. Definitely didn't meet my fairly high expectations. Next, I'm going to talk about Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil by V.E. Schwab. This is the highly anticipated new V.E. Schwab release of 2025. It follows 3 women in 3 different decades as they encounter vampires. I love V.E. Schwab in different capacities based on what style of book that she's writing. I really enjoy the Shades of Magic series for the adventure and the relationships. The characters in that are so fun. I really enjoy Addie LaRue for its contemplative look at identity and history and grief. And I was really hoping that this would be sort of a mashup of those two things that I really, really enjoy. It didn't quite live up to the expectations that I had for it. I was so excited to read a book about vampires, and I was so excited to read a book about feminine rage and, just all of the little things that V.E. Schwab is so good at. And instead, I found myself so incredibly annoyed. I just was feeling a little bit like the book was too long for all of the things that it wanted to do and say. Also, a gripe that I have with V.E. Schwab books often is that she so clearly has a favorite character when she's writing, and it is obvious in the writing that that character was her favorite character to write, and she put so much more time and attention and detail into that character. And often I find that character to be the most annoying character in her stories. I felt this way with Lila in the Shades of Magic series. I felt the same way about Sabine in this book, and she is a large majority of the beginning of the book. Her character is important. It sets up the whole story. And I was so annoyed to be in her perspective for so long. Maybe I'm being a little bit too nitpicky, but I've been having such a lackluster couple of reading years that I am so honed in on what I do and don't find annoying about books and what I do and don't love about books. And unfortunately, there was more in this book that I didn't love than I did. So while it had that great, really descriptive, flowery V.E. Schwab writing style that I really appreciate, the characters fell completely flat for me. Moving on, I'm going to talk about the next 2 books together. One of them I read in September, and then the next one I read in October. These are the first 2 books in the Raiders of the Arcana series, Empire of Shadows and The Tomb of the Sun King. This is a sort of fantastical historical series following our main character, Ellie. She is an archivist, and because she's a woman, she is looked down upon in her field. She doesn't have the same opportunities that the men in her field do. At the start of the first book, she comes across this map that leads to this potentially forgotten and completely hidden historical city. So she travels to British Honduras, and she convinces this land surveyor named Adam Bates to accompany her into the jungle to try to find this magical city. And of course, because it can never be just simple, she is being chased by another group of people who also want to find this place. There is so much action and adventure, but there's also a really good amount of romance, and the banter that happens between Ellie and Adam is just so fun to read. Watching their relationship sort of blossom over the course of the book is great. It's so fantastic. The second book is basically picking up right where the first book left off, and our heroes are going to travel to Egypt to solve a mystery there, and we get to meet some new characters along the way. If you're looking for something that's really similar to Veronica Speedwell, or like, I haven't read it, but Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, I think this would be a really good book to pick up because it has a lot of that really great historical context while also having a really fantastic relationship building as the series goes on. I think more people should be reading it. I don't see it talked about nearly enough on the bookish internet. So if you want something fun, historical, magical, very romantic, lots of banter, then pick up the Raiders of the Arcana series by Jacqueline Benson. The other book that I read in October is my favorite book that I've read so far this year. And while I am so sad that I waited so long to read this book, I'm so glad that I read it when I did because it seemed like the perfect book at the perfect moment. And that is Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. This is Sally Rooney's newest book. It came out in 2024 and it was my most anticipated release of 2024. And then I waited almost a whole year to finally get around to reading it. But like I said, I'm really glad that I read it when I did. This follows two brothers, Peter and Ivan, who are dealing with the very recent death of their father, and they are both grieving and coping in very different ways. Peter is a lawyer who is dating a much younger woman, but is also still a little bit hung up on his university girlfriend. He is sort of bouncing between the two of them throughout the story, and also just not being able to cope with and accept the fact that his father has died. It manifests in a very hostile relationship towards his brother. Ivan is 10 years younger than Peter. He is a chess prodigy, and at the start of the book, he starts a relationship with a woman that is quite a bit older than him. Over the course of the book, he is sort of trying to find his love of chess again, and also, again, accept that his father has passed away. It is a really interesting look at grief and family, relationships, love, but it is so much more about this very intense and complicated relationship between these two brothers. I honestly really loved it. I think that Sally Rooney writes about the human condition in such a perfect and nuanced way. She understands what makes people people. She understands how complicated relationships are, whether they're between romantic interests or their family or even just acquaintances. She just gets it right every single time. I absolutely love this book. It is my favorite book that I read so far this year. I honestly at this point don't think anything will surpass it just because we're so close to the end of the year and I've not been reading things that are just absolutely knocking me out of the park. If you haven't read this yet and you like Sally Rooney, then I would highly recommend giving this a go. It is just so wonderful and heartbreaking and complex, and that's what makes Sally Rooney to me, and I can't wait to see what she writes next. Moving on to November. First, I'm going to talk about How the King of Elfheim Learned to Hate Stories by Holly Black. This is a sort of companion novella to the Folk of the Air trilogy, which I read a few years ago and I really enjoyed. We're mainly following Cardan, who is the love interest. He is like the hate to love love interest in the Folk of the Air trilogy. We're getting to look at his childhood in this book. We watch him grow up. We watch him overcome his circumstances. We also get to see a little bit of a glimpse into his current life with Jude, which I really, really liked. I would say that if you haven't read the Folk of the Air trilogy and you plan on reading it, definitely read this soon after you finish that trilogy because you need that. It'll make you feel a little bit more connected to the characters and the story. If you haven't read this yet and you did really enjoy the Folk of the Air trilogy, I would also recommend going ahead and picking this up because it adds some really fun context to Cardan's character. Really fun. I'm really glad that I went ahead and read this. It's been on my TBR shelf for a while and it was a very quick read. I also read The Pumpkin Spice Cafe by Laurie Gilmore. This is the first book in the, Dream Harbor series. It sort of popped up a couple years ago and I've seen it all over the bookish internet. This is about a woman who decides to take over running her aunt's coffee shop. Her aunt has recently retired and she's left the coffee shop to our main character, whose name is escaping me at the moment. So our main character moves to this small town. She starts meeting all of the locals and she gets involved in their lives and friendships. Somebody is trying to sabotage her coffee shop. So there's a bit of a mystery element as well. It's sort of like a Hallmark movie, but then you add in a little bit of spicy stuff, spicy scenes. It was fine. I mean, it genuinely was just the most fine book I've ever read. It was very predictable. The mystery, I basically called it from the beginning, which I guess is kind of the point. Those types of stories, Hallmark movies, they're not meant to be mind-blowing plot twists. I found the relationship between the two main characters to be very insta-lovey. I didn't really feel their connection at all. I don't understand why it's as hyped as it is. Honestly, I don't understand why so many people love it as much as they do. But maybe I'm just cynical and and just really picky about books these days. And the final book that I'm going to talk about is the very last book that I read in November. I actually finished it on November 30th, very close to midnight. That is A Mouthful of Dust by Nevo. This is the 6th book in the Singing Hills cycle, and this is a series of little novellas following our main character Chi, who is a cleric. They travel around the world, the land, collecting the stories of the people they meet. And in this one, Chi has traveled to a small village that is recovering from a famine. And of course, because famine is devastating, these people have done some very bad things to survive. And Chi is just listening and learning, and there's a little bit of a mystery element involved as well. I really loved this. I think it is probably maybe my second favorite of the series behind the first book, The Empress of Salt and Fortune. I have really enjoyed the last couple of installments. I think Mammoth at the Gates, which was number 5, was really fantastic. And then I also really loved this one as well. This is a really fun, very short, easy reading novella series. If you're looking for something kind of quick right here at the end of the year to complete your reading goals or just to get a few more books on your read count, then I would definitely recommend the Singing Hills cycle. If you read the first couple books and didn't continue on, then I would urge you to do so, because the couple of books in the middle maybe sort of stalled the series a little bit, but the last couple of books have picked it right back up for me. I'm excited to read the 7th book that's coming out in May next year, and I think that the author is contracted to do at least one more installment after that, if not 2. So we've got a few more years of Singing Hills cycle books to read, which I'm very excited about. So that's going to do it for my fall wrap up. I read quite a bit over the last few months, and some things that I really enjoyed, some things I didn't enjoy as much, but definitely really happy to kind of be back in the reading groove. Let me know down in the comments if you've read any of the books that I mentioned in this video and what you thought about them. Did you have similar or different opinions to me? I'd really love to know. Also, let me know some books that you read over the last few months, or maybe your favorite book that you read over the last couple of months. I'd really love to know that as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you again very soon. Bye!